You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's start off with the biggest takeaway that I had with Syracuse's offense, and that is that this team has weapons galore. And I feel like we say that every single year because Syracuse typically gets off to a hot start and everyone seems to get involved before eventually we all know what happens. But this year does feel a little bit different. And here's why. The pedigree of these players. The two Georgia transfers, Jackson Meeks, Zeed Haynes, right? LeQuint Allen's an All-ACC running back. Oronde Gadsden is an All-American tight end, and he's back this season, and he's healthy, and he looks great. And Trebor Pena has emerged for this team. 5 touchdowns now in 2 weeks. I wish I had him on my fantasy team. So when I look at the weapons, I'm like, my goodness, I don't think this is a fluke. Against Georgia Tech, 8 players had at least 1 catch. 8 of them. That's already pretty good. It gets even better. 6 players had at least 4 catches in the game. Do you understand how hard that is to do? Have 6 players on your team catch at least 4 balls. That's hard. Those 6 players were Oronde Gadsden, Trebor Pena, Umari Hatcher, LeQuint Allen, Jackson Meeks, and Zeed Haynes. All had different amounts of yards, but they all were getting involved in the offense. They were all getting some touches. 8 total pass catchers, and 6 of them had at least 4 catches. This team has a lot of weapons, and it's also helped by the fact that they have a quarterback who can get them the ball at an incredibly high level. And this is no disrespect to prior Syracuse quarterbacks. This is a compliment to Kyle McCord, who is playing right now at a Heisman Trophy level. I'm not saying he's going to win the Heisman, but through 2 weeks, he's got nearly 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 1 pick, and completing nearly 70% of his passes. Okay, that is Heisman caliber through 2 weeks. Whether he can sustain that, hopefully he can. But they have a quarterback who can get them the ball with on top of their pedigree. And we haven't even mentioned Justice Ross Simmons, who's still dealing with a hamstring injury. Justice Ross Simmons is a Colorado State transfer. A lot of big programs were going after him this offseason. Syracuse was fortunate enough to land him. We don't even know what his role is going to be in this offense. Because through 2 weeks, they haven't really needed him yet. Now, as we get going, our depth is probably going to get tested more. Injuries do happen, right? We're seeing that with Justice Ross Simmons. But this team just has a boatload of weapons on it. And it's really, really nice to see everyone really getting involved in the offense. It's like Syracuse runs a play and you're like, all right, who's getting the ball this time? That's enjoyable. Sometimes, yeah, predictable's cool. But it's like, ooh, who's going to get it? It's that like interesting factor. It's fun to watch. So they have a lot of weapons. That was a big picture takeaway on offense against Georgia Tech. Number 2, we don't talk about them all that much, and maybe it's for better or worse. The offensive line. There were a lot of question marks with this offensive line heading into this season. I myself wasn't really in that boat because I like the transfer tackles that they brought in, Demetrius Weatherspoon and Savion Washington, who have both played really well. And also the fact that the quarterback can just get rid of the ball quickly and it'll mitigate the pressure on the offensive line to have to hold up for a long period of time. Well, through 2 weeks, I'm only going to speak on Georgia Tech, but it can apply to 2 weeks. They've looked fine. I haven't really noticed all that much from the offensive line, specifically in pass protection. That's a good thing. There was not a lot of pressure from Georgia Tech in this game. They only had 1 sack, if I recall. So the offensive line has looked really good to start this season, and they were solid against Georgia Tech. I'll do a deep dive on them later on in the week. But the offensive line deserves some love because they've looked pretty good so far, keeping Kyle McCord upright and letting him get the ball to the weapons that he does have. And number 3, I talked about this guy being a sleeper on Q Sports Talk Radio. Will Nixon is a really good backup running back. Will Nixon is a 3-star Washington transfer this offseason. He is the son to offensive coordinator Jeff Nixon. Against Georgia Tech, he had 9 carries for 38 yards. And we saw at times he was being used early in drives. First, second down, too. So this is not someone who is just a third down receiving back, which is what I thought his role was primarily going to be. And this is really, really good for Syracuse. And it speaks to, again, the amount of weapons that they have on offense. LeQuint Allen, I mentioned this off the top, is an all-ACC running back. Okay, he's capable of playing all 3 downs, but when you have a guy like Will Nixon who can run the ball well and can pass block well, he had a great blitz pickup in the second quarter that led to a 30-plus yard gain for Oronde Gadsden. And also, by the way, he's a converted wide receiver, so he can catch passes. You don't need LeQuint Allen always on the field. So when the time is right, sure, LeQuint Allen can be the workhorse. He's the best running back on the team. But Will Nixon can take some of the pressure off of LeQuint Allen because he is a quality backup running back. Better than I even thought he was going to be. Once again, 9 carries for 38 yards and was often used in early down situations against Georgia Tech. He was a big factor in the game plan this week. Didn't necessarily see it coming, but that was a wrinkle that I was pleasantly surprised to see. So Will Nixon is a quality backup running back for this team. So once again, the 3 main takeaways, big picture that I had against Georgia Tech. Number 1, there are so many weapons on this team. So many. 6 players with at least 4 catches in the game. That is really, really hard to replicate, but this team has a lot of depth, and Justice Ross Simmons isn't even back from injury yet. Number 2, the offensive line held up, right? They played well against Ohio. How are they going to do against a Power 4 ACC top 25 team in the country? Well, we have our answer. They look pretty good. And number 3, Will Nixon has been a pleasant surprise for this team. He is a really, really good backup running back to LeQuint Allen. When the time is right, LeQuint can be the workhorse. But for now, we got ourselves a little bit of a tandem here, and it is nice to see. So those are the offense takeaways from week 2 against Georgia Tech. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, your main takeaways from Syracuse's offense.